So I'll now hand over to Dr. Malcolm Barrett-Johnson, who will be moderating the meeting today. Many of you will know Malcolm. He's Managing Director of Pharma Medic Consultancy and has over 20 years experience as a consultant pharmaceutical physician to industry and government, advising bioscience and pharmaceutical companies on product development, regulatory strategy and medical affairs, focusing on startups and SMEs. So Malcolm, over to you.
Okay, Liz, thank you very much indeed. Gosh, did I write that script? I don't know if I did or not. Thank you. First of all, Liz, Anna, thank you both very much for arranging this morning, and thank you for everybody for attending. It's lovely seeing you again. This is our second breakfast meeting. We had some very good feedback from the first one, so thank you very much indeed. We're going to have an hour. We're going to keep on time. We're going to finish by 9. I've promised both our wonderful speakers this morning I will do that, and to everybody else, because I know everyone's got a very busy day. So we'll promise to finish by 9 o'clock. The last year has been a very difficult one for everybody, and also it's brought forward a lot of technologies, brought forward a lot of changes. And what I thought we'd focus on today is two areas where, on the consultancy side particularly, it's been a very difficult time to actually see if there's another way of looking at the way consultancy can be taken forward, and also the way that IR35 has affected consultants as well, and is affecting them. So I would like to introduce two of our speakers, the two speakers who very kindly agreed to join us this morning. The first is Dr. Katrina McMahon. Katrina is a lovely, lovely person. She used to be my boss many years ago, but I'll let you, Katrina, probably flesh that out a bit more. Katrina is probably one of the senior executive coaches in the country, especially on the pharma side, but also more generally in healthcare sectors. And she's executive coach and a pharmaceutical physician at Tiara Coaching Limited. So Katrina, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's wonderful having you with us. I'm going to also introduce Kate Cox. We'll probably say, Kate, a little bit about you a little bit later on again, but lovely to having you again, Kate, here. Kate is a tax manager and one of the senior managers at QDOS Contractors Limited. QDOS is a very, very senior company working on the contractors side, especially focused on IR35. And Kate's going to be focusing on the IR35 and the elements that go into IR35 and what we as contractors and consultants should be looking at on that side of things. So a wonderful panel. As Liz said, we're going to basically look at the way that this consultancy has managed over the last year, and Katrina's going to give some pointers on how to manage ourselves as well. We're going to finish with a Q&A session at the end of this session, but we'll take some questions after Katrina's spoken to, because Katrina is going to have to dash off a little bit later. Okay, Katrina. Well, actually, Anna, are we having a poll first? We are. Okay, fantastic.
Yes, we are.
So we're going to start off with a poll. So Anna's in charge of technical today. So we're going to put the poll up. So this seems to work incredibly well, which I'm always quite surprised at.
It's the wrong poll.
It's the wrong poll.
Oh, bear with me.
I knew it was going to be too good to be true.
Yes, apologies. So now it's been launched.
We're going to have to do that one.
Well, it's for Kate. I do apologise.
Let's do that one. And can we do Katrina?
Before. Apologies, Katrina. No. I'll bring yours up shortly.
Not a problem.
Okay. Well, Anna, we'll do this one. We'll come back to Katrina's after, otherwise.
All right. I'll end the polling now.
All right. Can you bring that back on later?
I'll try.
Okay. All right.
So that will be good for. Okay. I can relaunch the polling. So okay. I'm going to close this one down. Here it comes.
There we go. Fantastic. So there we go. Work satisfaction. The work that I'm doing now will help me achieve my ambition and realize my full potential. So guys, if you'd like to answer that poll, and then we should have the results up in real time, I think.
Sure. A few more seconds and I'll stop.
It always impresses me this actually works in real time.
Okay. I'll end the poll there and launch the results, share results.
Right, okay.
Great.
So 48% yes. So Katrina, can I introduce you please? And thank you again.
Thank you. 52% unsure or no, even better. Okay, well, welcome. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you this morning. And thank you, Malcolm, for inviting me, and to Anna and Liz for helping getting all the technology and the support and getting me here on time and everything else. One of the lovely things about looking at a photograph of yourself on a slide is that you actually realise the impact of COVID. Because one of the decisions I took early on in COVID was to let all the hair dye grow out and actually start to live my greyness. And I'm sitting here thinking, maybe I need to get some new photographs done, but we'll see, we'll see. As Malcolm's intimated, I've worked with him for many years, and throughout our time together, we've had several delightful discussions around career development, ambition, personal development, professional development. And one of the things I've really loved about working and discussing things like that with Malcolm is that he's always been very open, and he's always allowed us to explore into the areas where perhaps he was more unsure, whereas a lot of people prefer to work in the areas that they're more confident. And as a consequence, he, with some others, taught me just how passionate I was about working with other people as they really develop. And I've learned so much actually working with people who are willing to share their thoughts about where they would like to be and how they would like to get there with me. Today, I've only got 10 minutes, really 10, 15 minutes, so I really can't touch this topic in any depth. And as a result, as all good consultants, I'm not exactly going to follow the title of the talk. Instead, what I'm going to do is leave you hopefully with one or two teasing thoughts, one or two, what ifs, one or two, no, that's a different way to think about it. And that for me at this point in time will be absolutely perfect. So if I do that, that would be great. I'm going to talk very briefly about moving forward and developing yourself within the frame of career. And that can be developing your career or developing yourself using your career as a means by which you can do that. It is very much up to you how you wish to translate within the frame of career. But I've found over the years that working with pharmaceutical physicians, physicians within the NHS, and indeed many others, that I hear two principal stories. And I accept I'm going to oversimplify them for the purposes of today's meeting. But it's, again, as I say, I'm just wanting to leave you with a thought, not necessarily with things that you can take away and do. So the first oversimplification is a descriptor of the people that I work with, where they are looking to develop what I call within the line. In other words, they are looking for the classical role progression. They are seeking their next promotion. They are seeking perhaps it's a lateral move, because they've recognised that to get the next promotion, they need to gain additional skill sets, or they need to diversify their core so that they can take on a more administrative, executive oversight. But these roles, these conversations, I call working towards a known. You know what it is you're working towards. You might not know what it is you need to do, but you've got a very good idea. And very often you actually know who it is that you wish you aspire to be like, or who it is that you wish to work with as a mentor, or who it is that you know you can go to for conversations to get deeper thoughts and insights into what you do. This sort of coaching, this sort of support I've found is frequently goal focused because my clients understand the goal. They know what it is. They might not be able to specify, but they've got an overarching description of what it is they're trying to achieve. A promotion, for example, moving into clinical research, for example. And this may mean diversifying your skills, this may mean learning new skills, or it may mean adapting to the fact that you're going to have to perhaps take a cut in pay or a cut in reward, because shifting laterally, you might have to go lateral and down so that you can grow back up again. And so there's quite complex discussions that still happen. There's an awful lot of work that needs to happen. So I'm not trying to talk about this as if it's a superficial type of personal development. Is actually very deep and it's very challenging. And one of the reasons why I say it's very challenging is because a critical skill that has to be developed is learning how to ask for feedback and how to assimilate the feedback. And critically, how to both embrace and reject, because not all feedback is actually valid. But if you start rejecting the feedback as not valid too early, it leads to a lack of insight, to defensiveness, but actually bringing on the feedback, sitting with it, understanding it, and then saying it's not actually relevant. That's a critical skill set. Some of this involves personality and personality profiling, personality testing, and a lot of that is based around understanding yourself. And I also like to bring in the concept of understanding what is not there, because the personality profiling demonstrates your strengths, but in actual fact, what it's also demonstrating are the elements of your continuity that you are not strong at expressing, or that you suppress for a reason because you've got a belief system around that particular type of behaviour. So, for example, using insights is a very simple example. You might describe yourself as fiery red. Now, fiery red probably, and so this is leadership, is directive at a very simplistic level, but it actually means that you're probably a lot more uncomfortable getting into the detail, or perhaps you're more uncomfortable reaching out and managing conflict through helping others, actually developing into a place of mutual understanding. So developing yourself within the line, role progression, feedback, personality understanding, reaching into the areas where you're both strong and where you've been not expressing to the fullest. And skills, without a doubt. But the other cohort of clients that I work with, and they are a smaller cohort without any doubt, are those who are actually looking to develop through fundamental change. And these clients often come to me feeling quite confused. They're aware of something. They're aware of a desire to do more. They're aware of a desire to step out of where they are today and take a very different journey. And it's an awareness, but they don't necessarily know what it is. There's a deep sense of, I need to be there, a sense of purpose, but also a sense of being off track. I need to be there, but I know I'm here. And there's a desire and a dissatisfaction, and it's what I like to call an existential tension. And this tension both energizes towards, I know, but also holds one back because I don't know. And so it's a fascinating dynamic to be within. And most of us, at some point, actually get there. And the critical thing is, at what point are we ready to take it on and deal with it. It is very difficult, and often what happens, for very good reasons, is that we end up taking small steps which lead back to a more routine path of skills attainment. And part of that in my own learning journey was very much about, as a coach, as a mentor, as a friend, actually learning to sit with not knowing rather than trying to find a solution. So you don't know, you're thinking about this, so what about if you did that? Or what could you do? Rather than just saying, okay, what don't you know? Let's explore not knowing. And it's a very different place to actually sit within. But staying on the routine path of skills attainment might actually deepen the sense of dissatisfaction. And then, of course, guess what? The client gets dissatisfied with me, which is perfectly understandable. So over time and through personal experience, I've actually learned that when someone is genuinely at that point in their life where that sense of existential tension, the knowledge there is something more, is becoming so strong that you don't know how to deal with it. You don't know where to go with it. And this actually has been happening to me for quite a long time. When opportunities were coming up, so when, for example, when I started my consultancy, I got an opportunity to actually get an interim role, an interim exec role. Yes. And my colleagues, my friends, actually it was my friends who said to me, why? It's not what you want to do. Oh, okay. And I sat with that, and sure enough, I didn't do it. Within the coaching world, I've had the opportunity as well to join some agency. Why do you want to do that? What's within that? It's not there, is it? But then recently, I was asked to do something, and it suddenly hit home. So if we could move on to the next slide. The core of the challenge is, and I describe it this way, I was invited to step off the edge of my security consciousness and to move into the night of trust. So late summer last year, I was approached about taking role as the chair of Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital NHS Trust. And if any of you are aware of press around maternity, around CQC, you might recognise the name of Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Hospital NHS Trust. And if you are, you will recognise that some of the thoughts that were going through my mind were politely, hornet's nest, destroying my career as an NHS chair before I'd even started. First chair's job, get real. Commute, 3.5 hours away from where I live. Do I really? And the answer was yes. Yes, 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 yes. Not to any of those questions, by the way, but just the answer to the invitation was yes. Because when I looked at the questions, I realised that each one of those questions was taking me back into my need for security, my need to know that I was okay, my need to know that what I was aiming to do had a chance of being successful, my need to know that what I was aiming to do had a chance of making me rather than destroying me. All of those things. And I couldn't answer yes to any of those questions, but I knew it was the right thing for me to do. So I moved into the night of trust, not knowing, trusting that this is what I've been waiting for. This is what was going to allow me to fulfill my purpose, whatever my purpose might be. Which brings me on to the thought of purpose. Quite often when I work with clients with purpose, I find myself saying, so what is your purpose? What do you feel is your purpose? And over the years, I've learned that as soon as you start to actually say what purpose is, you start to go back into security language. My purpose is to make a difference. Okay, that's fine. What sort of difference? Well, I'm good here, so I could work there. Okay, security language. Now, don't let me diss security. Security is absolutely critical. It is one of the core centres within our personality. It is one of the first things we reach out for the minute we're born, is the security of our mother's breast. Security can be fundamental in security. Think Maslow, think Paget and other psychologists, think Ken Wilber. Absolutely fundamental. Within security, I also build in the need to be loved, the need to be respected. And throughout all of our development, security is absolutely critical. And, you know, we've got spouses, we've got children, we've got responsibilities. And at elements of our career, security always comes first, because getting our kids through university, getting our kids through school is more important. Perhaps this year it's our spouse's turn to step out and do something different. So security takes priority. And that's absolutely perfect. But there will be a time when security is not enough anymore. And that's when we move into the night of trust. But when I think of the night of trust, it lacks clarity, but it's not dark. There is a moon, there are stars. You can see, but you can't see detail. You know you're holding a book, but you can't see the pages. You can see the person's coming towards you. You can tell by their shape that you probably know who they are, but you can't see their face. You can see the shadows, which tells you that something is there. You can see a path ahead of you, but you can only see a couple of yards. That's the night. And the trust is about embracing the doubt and the need for confidence, the need for clarity and certainty as you seek and work with the information and the insights that come towards you. And this is a time where your friends, your mentors, your family, and perhaps coaches really work with you to sit with you in the night and stay with you there whilst you move towards that depth of trust in your own ability to move forward. And trust in what it is you're moving towards. So, with those two thoughts, career within the line, really important first stage about developing that breadth of skill sets and the importance of feedback and being able to really develop your understanding of yourself and how you can morph and work with yourself to fit with the goals that you're setting yourself. And then subsequent to that, the night of darkness, the night of trust rather, and how you wish to play in that space. So when I work with people, I suggest we map out a draft of your purpose, but never taking it any further. Stay with the draft. Learn to be uncomfortable with not having security. Purpose or vision, have a draft. Bring your need for security into awareness. Children, personal requirements, family requirements. Decide whether the time is right. And if the time is not yet right, celebrate that fact, work with it, develop your career within the frame that you're a lot more sure of, because you're going to be just as valuable there. And then when you realize it's your time, step into and embrace the night. Step into and embrace the uncertainty and the ambiguity, because that goal is there. You just need to work your way towards it and find it. And bring your friends, your family, your trusted peers and colleagues, mentors with you. I appreciate I've gone a bit off topic. I just wanted to leave you with this concept of security consciousness and the night of trust, when you're thinking about developing yourself either within your company or as a consultant. And what is it you're really, really wanting to do rather than thinking you should do. On that, I'll finish. Thank you.
Katrina, thank you. A lot to think about. And I think anybody who's gone from what might be termed a normal job into consultancy knows exactly what you mean. You know, I've done that a few occasions. I went from medicine into government, from government into another role and whatever. And I think going from any other job into a consultancy role is probably the most difficult one, isn't it? Because you're literally jumping. You don't know where you're going. You're not quite sure what direction you're going in. Everybody says, do you think you've made the right decision? Especially your family. Your family can be actually some of the worst people to keep you back, can't they? They say, well,
oh, yeah.
Actually, when you're getting the money in, how are we going to pay the mortgage? How are we going to do this?
And that's where security, that's the security piece.
It is. It's very difficult. Katrina, we got one or two questions for you. So let me just ask you this. I know, Kate will pop you on very shortly. Thank you. We'll do our very best to keep the time. So, role of the mentor, Katrina, in supporting the individual seeking advancement. So, what's a mentor's role? So, if you're new to people sort of mentoring you, what should you be looking for, and how can that help you?
So, I think of your mentor as your grandfather. A good mentor is somewhere who is or has been where it is that you're aiming towards. Someone who can talk to you from a position of really understanding what it's like to grow into that space, and therefore the skills that you need to develop, the insights that you need to develop, and can explain to you and guide you side by side. But it's along a path that is known and understood because they've been there before. But equally, they bring coaching skills with them. So they're not telling you what you need to do, but they're actually inquiring with you as to how you would like to get there. But they do bring a lived experience into it. So if you're working with a mentor, the first thing I would ask is, have they been sufficiently close to where I'd like to go that they can share some real experience, both the good and the bad? And are they likely to walk with me rather than take me by the hand and lead me there, because their way's the way to do it?
Yeah, it's always difficult finding a good mentor. Bina, good morning. So you got your hand up.
Hi, Katrina.
Hiya.
I was really captivated by this concept of security and night of trust. And I'm sure that in your line of work, you're often approached by people who effectively have been had their confidence destroyed, either through toxic work culture or a life event, or just life in general. And, how do you build this philosophy with them? Because then it's not easy in that scenario. I've spoken to a lot of people who've ended up there, and it's very hard indeed.
In my experience, and it is my experience, it's about actually working within security consciousness first. So if you've got someone who is traumatized, it's about actually working with them into a place where they can experience the opposite of the trauma. And then once they've developed the strength, once they've developed the understanding that they are actually okay, then slowly working towards the night of trust. But developing the security, developing that person's confidence in their confidence again, their core essence of, I'm actually okay. And once you can develop a sense of I'm okay, then you can develop the sense that you're okay as well. And that's when the trust can start to redevelop between people. But if we go straight into the night of trust, into not knowing, you can actually leave them very, very vulnerable. But celebrating security, bringing it into consciousness, whatever that might mean for that individual, because it will mean different things for different people, taking them into that space and just luxuriating in learning that I'm okay and they're allowed to be okay too. And then in time move on.
Vina, thank you. Katrina, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
It's lovely seeing you. And
if there are any other questions, please just send them through, and I'm quite happy to put written responses to people.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And Katrina was saying that she sort of had a fairly tough day yesterday with the trust. So,
and I'm sharing a meeting with the trust in 15 minutes. So,
are you okay? Fantastic. Well, even more. Thank you very much indeed. As Katrina said, we've known each other for a long, long time, and Katrina's a really lovely, lovely, lovely person. So, Katrina, thank you again.
Thank you. Take care now, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Right. And so, the second speaker we've got is Kate Cox. Now, Kate is the manager and tax manager at QDOS. QDOS is a company which I think, Kate, you're probably better explain than me. It's a very important company now because it's very much involved with contractors generally, contractor insurance, but also some of you probably come to know it in terms of IR35. I've had 2 IR35 assessments recently, and these have been, one of them has been taken through QDOS. QDOS has got a fantastic framework for asking questions to find out whether you are within or without IR35. So hopefully everybody sort of is aware of IR35, even if you haven't been part of it. It's dominated consultancy life for the last 2-3 years to some extent for many of us. It's something which I personally think is a bit silly in terms of where it's trying to get to, only in the sense that I feel it's a bit of a tax sort of grab for the government. But maybe, Kate, you can sort of enlighten us a bit more about this, because obviously I'm looking at it from one point of view. So, Kate, if I can introduce you, and it's lovely having you here today, and thank you very much.
And thank you again for inviting us. So, yeah, if I could go on to the first slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, IR35, and just moving on to a slightly different or drier subject than Katrina's, but this is a piece of tax legislation that has been in place since 2000. So we've had the legislation for quite a long time, and QDOS were actually a small sort of tax consultancy business set up actually in 1988, and then obviously dealt with IR35 and started undertaking IR35 inquiries when IR35 was first introduced. And I myself have been with QDOS since 2002, so dealt with IR35 really since its inception. It's never been a particularly successful piece of tax legislation. So, with the IR35 reform that we have in place, it's been changed a lot along the way. There've been slight tweaks and changes, and then IR35 reform, purely because the legislation hasn't really worked, and HMRC have never really got the tax yield from it that they perhaps had expected to. But what it is designed to do is to tackle what HMRC perceive to be tax avoidance by individuals working through a limited company, a personal service company, but actually behaving like employees for their end clients. There is an advantage, obviously, for both an end client and individual supplier of services, because for the client, obviously, they don't have to pay holiday pay, those sorts of employment related benefits, and the individual who's operating through their limited company can enjoy those tax benefits, particularly in terms of national insurance. IR35 is really complex, so it's not a case of ticking a few boxes and being able to determine someone's employment status, but it requires a look at all of the tests in the round, and there's a number of employment status tests which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment. And IR35 requires HMRC to create what they refer to as a hypothetical contract. So as a contractor, you may have an agreement in place with an agency rather than the relationship with the end client that HMRC will want to get to the bottom of. And that's what they refer to as the hypothetical contract. Next slide, please. So these are the key IR35 status tests. Although we have IR35 reform in place, the key tests haven't changed at all. So we still have in place all of the same key status tests that we had when IR35 was first introduced. The top three really are the most important kind of determining factors with regard to employment status. So right of substitution is about the ability for a contractor to send someone else in their place if the initial individual is unable to undertake the work. And that's really to help demonstrate that it's a genuine business that's being engaged rather than a specific individual. The control element is a bit more kind of self-explanatory, but really about the level of control a contractor can exercise over the provision of services. And a contractor should be able to, in particular, control their own method of work. Mutuality of obligations is about the ongoing obligation between contractor and client for continuing work. So in a genuine contract for the provision of services, there shouldn't be that kind of continuing mutuality of obligations. Financial risk, again, is a bit more self-explanatory. Obviously, you know, any genuine business should take an element of financial risk. Part and parcel is about being able to undertake the services as an independent worker and not being integrated within a client organisation. So being visible as an independent contractor. And HMRC and particular tribunals of late, recent tribunal cases, business trappings has become more important. So, you know, having those things in place that make you look like a genuine business. And the last one, exclusivity, is simply that a contractor shouldn't be prevented from undertaking contracts for other clients. So, you know, it shouldn't be an exclusive contract. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So IR35 was announced in the autumn budget, the IR35 reform in the private sector. We have previously had IR35 reform in the public sector, and that happened in 2017. So it was, you know, a natural progression, I guess, for HMRC that they would eventually introduce it into the private sector. It was actually meant to be implemented in April 2020, but was actually delayed due to the coronavirus pandemic. It only applies to medium to large businesses. So the criteria for that is set out in the Companies Act. But if contractors are engaged to a small business, then actually the rules haven't changed and a contractor will still be able to determine their own IR35 status. So that is quite important. So there's no change for contractors that are engaged directly to small businesses. And when we're referring to small businesses there, it is a reference to the end client organisation for whom a contractor would work. And as I said previously, the tests used to determine status haven't changed. It really is only the responsibility and liability for IR35 that's changed. So all of the case law that we've had in the tax tribunals, that is absolutely still relevant. Next slide, please. So these are the IR35 changes. So obviously you can see under the IR35 rules pre-April 2021 that contractors were always responsible for determining their own IR35 status and for paying the relevant tax, whereas under the new rules post-April 2021, clients are responsible for determining a contractor's IR35 status, and the fee payer, who will typically be an agency, is responsible for deducting the necessary tax and NI from a contractor before a contract is actually paid. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, as I said before, clients now must assess all off-payroll workers for IR35. So they must make that IR35 determination and say whether a contractor falls inside or outside of IR35. They have to provide a statement confirming the determination made and their reasoning behind it. And there must also be a client-led disagreement process so that a contractor, you know, if they don't agree with that determination, they're able to appeal it to say, you know, why they don't agree with the determination made. The fee payer, once it receives that determination from the client, they must, where appropriate, deduct the necessary tax and national insurance, and the fee payer will also carry the IR35 liability. So obviously contractors from April 2021 won't have a liability for IR35 because that will now rest with the fee payer. Okay, next slide, please. So the impact on contractors really has been that lots of contractors have been maybe diverted to an umbrella or payroll company, because typically with umbrella companies, they will actually employ contractors for tax purposes. So it kind of takes away that IR35 issue. But despite the fact that contractors might be employed for tax purposes, they still have to pay their costs of running their business. There are no rights to employment benefits. And also, if a contractor is caught within IR35, you lose that ability to claim travel and subsistence expenses. Now, that's really ordinary commuting, so extraordinary expenses can still be claimed, but the kind of travel to and from work can no longer be claimed if you're found to be inside of IR35 by the end clients. There is a need for contractors to kind of discuss the reform with the agency and client to ensure, you know, that there is a process in place. What process is the client going to take in terms of IR35 reform? And contractors will need to ensure that, you know, you do kind of have evidence to support your IR35 status, so that if there is, you know, if you do want to dispute the determination that your client might have made, that you have some evidence in place. And obviously contractors rightly have had some doubts over whether the client kind of appeal process is going to be effective. You know, how much are the client going to listen to a contractor's kind of argument in terms of their I-35 status. Next slide, please. So lots of clients have been taking kind of risk-averse decisions in terms of the off-payroll rules by making blanket approaches to the legislation. HMRC do say that that is unlawful and that clients really should be determining status on an individual basis for contractors. So it isn't right for blanket rulings to be made, or some end clients may just say that they will no longer use contractors at all. So there has been quite a risk-averse approach, and I think that's probably been one of the main impacts on contractors with regard to the legislation, in that it's been quite restrictive. Next slide, please. So this is one of the limitations, really, I guess, with the off-payroll reforms, is the CES tool that HMRC have introduced to determine I-35 status. And one of the key things with this is that it doesn't allow you to kind of add any specific context behind responses. So it's a tool which is designed to help an end client make a decision regarding I-35 status. And the fact that it doesn't allow you to provide any context behind the responses means that it almost kind of contradicts case law, in that, you know, I-35 should not be a case of ticking the relevant boxes. You know, you have to consider all of the evidence in the round. So it doesn't always provide an opinion on I-35 status as well, and may sometimes actually provide an indeterminate response. Next slide, please. Okay, so I mean, QDOS, you know, we've been very kind of prevalent in assisting clients with regard to I-35 reform, both in the public sector and the private sector. One of the things that we did design, as Malcolm talked about earlier, is the creation of our QDOS status review platform, which provides clients and fee payers with a solution to the rules, and it ensures that there is a fair assessment of a contractor's I-35 status, in that it will always provide an opinion on I-35 status. And there is you can add specific context behind your responses to the tool that QDOS have in place. But not only that, with the tool, we also ensure everyone in the supply chain with regard to the I-35 liability and investigation defence, should HMRC later kind of challenge those determinations made. But we've also helped lots of clients kind of determine where the responsibilities lie in the contractual chain, because that can actually be very, very complex. And we continue to provide, you know, advice and resources to contractors, fee payers and clients, and purely to kind of understand the legislation, because it's an extremely complex piece of tax legislation, and really always has been. But although we do have the I-35 reform in place, contractors will still have a liability for their I-35 status prior to I-35 reform in the private sector. So we'll still carry a liability for I-35 status pre-April 2021. And because of that, we're kind of still continuing the services that we always provided to contractors, in terms of providing inquiry defence for contractors and undertaking contract reviews, so that contractors can understand their I-35 status to basically protect against the I-35 risk that they carry pre-April 2021. Okay, so that concludes my I-35 presentation. So I'll pass back over to Malcolm, but please don't hesitate to contact me directly if you do think of any further questions that you'd like to ask them. Then feel free to get in touch.
Kate, thank you very much indeed. It's such an important area for us on the consultancy side at the moment, and indeed for all companies involving and working with consultants too. A lot of questions for you. First one from Fiona. Fiona, thanks you very much indeed. Lovely seeing you here. What's the definition of small in terms of the company, the end client?
Yeah, in terms of small, it's as defined in the Companies Act. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what the criteria is, but I mean, I can send that out by email if we've got the person's email address.
It's quite big, isn't it? It's something like 50
It
million.
is, yeah. It's based on turnover, also number of employees, which I think is, so if you have more than 50 employees, I think that's one of the criteria, and the rest of the other two, because there's 3 sets of criteria in place, the other 2 are related to turnover. Right. So yeah, it's based on turnover and number of employees.
That sounds quite big, say it's 50 million, but actually that's quite small for most of the companies we work with.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Probably have a turnover in excess of that.
Yeah.
The next one, Kate, or the next 2 actually, one from Jessica and another one as well. What is it? How does the reform apply to clients overseas, and more specifically, things like the US? Do they need to be assessed again if you're working for a US company?
Yeah, I mean, this is an area which has been quite confusing, as you can imagine. So if you're working for a client that's completely overseas, they have no presence within the UK whatsoever, then what would happen under the I-35 rules is that a contractor would actually be required to determine their own I-35 status. But that would be where the client who is overseas has no UK presence whatsoever. So if they have a branch, for example, within the UK, then that UK branch would be required to make that determination.
Hello? Hi. Sorry, my phone went off. I do apologise. Right, the next one is around. Oh, hang on. Where are we? Status test discuss. Do you all need to be? Who is liable if you haven't got an agency involved? So if you haven't got an agency involved, Kate, would it lie with the client or would it lie with the individual?
It would lie with the client. So if the client is the end client and is also the organisation that pays the fees, pays the income relating to that contract, then it would rest with the client.
Another question, part and parcel. What's the meaning in IR35 evaluation?
Yeah, so part and parcel is all about how integrated a contractor is within that client organisation. So it's quite important really because, you know, this is where, and particularly for contractors that perhaps have been with their client for a long period of time, you know, tend to become more integrated within a client organisation and effectively treated more like an employee, basically. So invited to, you know, perhaps all team meetings, all social events, those kind of things. So there's lots of different kind of facets to that particular test, but it's, you know, it's all about how integrated, you know, how part of that organisation a contractor might be. And from an I-35 perspective, really, there should be some independence between the contractor and the end client.
From Claire, good morning. Hi, thank you. Not a stupid question at all. Who exactly is the fee payer you mentioned earlier in your talk? What fees are you referring to?
So the fees I'm referring to there, and it's not a silly question at all, is simply the contractor's fees relating to the, you know, the work that they're undertaking. So whoever actually pays the contractor those fees, so pays the contractor directly. So whether that is a client or whether that is an agency.
Right, that's very clear. No, thank you. And Susan, good morning, Susan. How do you determine exclusivity? Very, very important one, this one. Do you need to have more than one client or less than full-time hours devoted per client?
Yeah, I mean, there is no kind of definition of exclusivity, and this is something that HMRC don't do. They don't tend to define these things in tax legislation. But with the exclusivity test, I mean, it's more about having the ability to undertake work for other clients, but certainly having multiple clients, so even just more than one client would demonstrate that a contract is not exclusive.
Oh, thick and fast. So sole contract. Right. Don't quite understand that one. I'm going to ask my own one, actually, Kate, if I can. So the right of substitution has been one of the sort of critical factors, isn't it?
Yes.
In terms of how it works. How are you finding that? Is that something that you're finding is a really sticking point, or is it something that people are overcoming?
Yeah, I think it is it's always been a bit of a sticking point, because for lots of contractors who are perhaps the sole director within their business, you know, we often kind of get asked, well, how can I provide a substitute if I'm the only one in my business? And the answer to that would be that you would, in order to provide a substitute, seek to engage a contractor through perhaps their, you know, another limited company. It might be another person that you know who operates their own limited company and provides very similar services. So that's what you would need to do. I mean, I think now, because of I-35 reform, in a sense, it's kind of made it easier for contractors, because what clients are starting to do is realise that they need to have these things in place for contractors and actually allow contractors to provide a substitute. And lots of clients that we've been working with have actually put in place engagement policies whereby there is actually a process to allow contractors to be able to provide a substitute.
I promised we'd finish on time, so we will. We're coming up to 9 o'clock. Apologies for my phone getting off. That's one thing I've got to remember, but I try and keep my mobile on just in case we have to communicate externally. Kate, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate that. It's a very complex area. And one we're going to hear a lot more about, aren't we, I think? And Thank you. It's much appreciated. Would you be okay if we sent any other questions to you?
Oh, of course,
That'd be
yes.
okay.
And I will, yes, I'll have that information ready for the lady that was asking about the definition of a small company as well. Okay, lovely. Thank you, Kate. So all that remains for me is to thank Kate again, thank Katrina, and thank Anna, and thank Liz, who've been working tirelessly behind the scenes to get this going. It's never easy to put this sort of thing together. So thank you both very much, but most of all, thank you for all of you attending. I hope you're finding this useful, and it's lovely having you all here. We're hopefully going to hold another one of these in a couple months' time. So please send your ideas in to me and Anna and to Liz to let us know what you think. Let us know what areas you'd like covered. There's so much to discuss on this side of it. And I think 2021 is going to be a very interesting year for all of us. Thank you. We're getting all these messages up. Thank you. That's lovely. Really, that's great. Have a lovely day. We've got a lovely weekend ahead of us with wonderful weather, I hope. Hope you all get out to see some of it. Okay. All right. Thank you. And take care. All right. Bye.